Dr. Nicole Grimes, thank you so much for joining me on Cocktails and Convo. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rox. It's an honor to be here.
Likewise. Thank you again. Listen, before we get into our dialogue, it's only right that we start with a toast. Let us toast to our pursuit to continue on the path of educational excellence as we continue to do whatever we can to make a difference in the lives of children. Cheers.
Cheers.
So let's just jump right in. On your website,
let's go.
You have this quote saying, "I have a responsibility to pay it forward in pursuit of educational equity and justice." Talk more about that responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, first off, Sean, as you may know, I'm an immigrant. I came from Trinidad when I was about 15 years old. That's when I moved to the United States. I did about 2 years in high school here, and I was so fortunate to have, some guidance around me, and I was able to attend university for the first time. I'm the first person in my family. So I'm a first-generation college grad, represented my entire family.
Cheers to that.
And that was just something that I could never have, imagined in my wildest dreams, being able to move to the United States. And I never take for granted all the opportunities that my education here has afforded me. I've also been duly blessed to have worked in education for almost 2 decades here in New York City. And if it's one thing that I've learned, I've seen a lot. I've worked with so many different stakeholder groups, and I'm even more committed and passionate about ensuring that all young people have access, to a life that's meaningful and with the, all the opportunities and all the blessings that they would like. So when we talk about equity, which I know we can't have a whole conversation and not dabble in many different ways.
Absolutely.
It's just so important, for this kind of work to continue. And I'm just, I absolutely have a responsibility to pass on my blessings to others that I work with.
To pass on those blessings to others, which is extremely important. And you know what? You talked about education being that foundation. I truly believe that education is the game changer. Anybody who knows me knows I always say that education saves lives. I'm a living testament of that. So, and you being the first in your family to attend college, I was also the first in my family. So I absolutely understand the importance and significance of that. So, as an educator, we'll continue on that route. Our New York City school system is gearing up to reopen schools on September 10th, which is just a few short weeks away. So as a former school principal, what are your thoughts regarding New York City's reopening?
I think the spotlight is on New York City for all of the obvious reasons, right? Us being the largest public education system in the entire country.
Right.
Most states usually look to New York to figure out, okay, what's New York doing? We're going to follow in their footsteps and so on and so forth. I would say I am really, really happy. I am not personally, part of the team tasked with making these enormous decisions affecting millions of lives, here in New York City. I would say I was very surprised. I really, really thought that there was going to be a delayed reopening of schools in New York because we are so large and because there are so many parties affected by public schooling here. But I also understand the pressure, that the chancellor and the mayor are obviously probably feeling, because we have parents who want to get back to work and need to get back to work. And we recognize that, without childcare, how are families going to be able to juggle, their kids not being in school every single day? So I completely, empathize with, that personal struggle. I think generally the feeling is frustration and maybe a little bit of despair in some spaces because there's so many questions and not enough answers. And as you said, time is ticking. We have almost 600 schools that have yet to submit a reopening plan and have it approved by the city. 600 schools. You can do the math and multiply and figure out how many students and families we're talking about. But the fact of the matter is there are no easy answers. Every school is unique, has different challenges, have different resources, different populations that they need to attend to and make sure that they're providing services for. So again, I absolutely get the challenge that the city has and the concerns and us trying to do the best job to accommodate working families and parents. But I remain concerned, very, very concerned about our students.
Absolutely.
You know, I think at the end of the day, when we ask ourselves any questions about the school system, we always have to bring ourselves back to, but what is best for our students? You know, and because of that, I remain concerned about our students who are not going to have regular access to counseling and social emotional support services.
Yeah, every decision we make, every decision we make, there is a child at the end of that decision. So you're absolutely right that we got to focus on the children. And another point you made, there are absolutely feelings of despair, absolutely feelings of frustration, and these high levels of uncertainty around opening schools, and me included. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts some more regarding that, but let's take a quick look at this clip and then we'll talk more about it.
Today is the final day for every single school in New York City to go ahead and submit their final plans on what education will look like in the fall. And then next week, schedules will start going out to parents. But now, even the governor is saying school districts across the state are not doing a very good job communicating with parents on what to expect in just a few weeks.
Despite the mayor pushing ahead, there's growing doubt tonight about classrooms opening September 10th.
I don't believe they're ready for that yet.
Not safe enough.
Not safe enough, yes. It should give some more times.
We still have issues with COVID. So why infect the children to have them come home? Children are germ carriers.
Teachers and principals have already urged the mayor postpone in-class learning. And today the governor said just because schools have permission to reopen doesn't mean they must.
I'm telling you, I'm talking to the parents, I'm talking to the teachers. There is a disconnect between many school districts and the teachers and the parents.
So definitely, as we said before, there's some uncertainty. People have some questions and concerns about New York City's reopening plan. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I feel that the sentiments shared in that video clip, you know, I share, you know, and they're logical ones, you know. We are talking about making a decision that not just affects the learning and I guess the social time and the social development of our children, but let's be kind and honest and recognize that we're actually talking about a decision that's literally going to affect the literal lives of adults who are exposing themselves and potentially putting themselves at risk every single day for, I guess, the greater good, so to speak. You know, I mean, again, as I was saying before, I'm concerned about the students who are not going to be able to have the regular services, whether they're in ICT classrooms, you know, or whether they need certain kinds of counseling and support services. But I'm also concerned about the adults who will be working with them, you know, and the ways that they are exposing themselves to any potential danger. You know, at the end of the day, too, it's no easy decision. But I do feel that there is some promise here. There's a little light at the end of this tunnel. And I feel like here we have a wonderful opportunity to really develop a much more coherent virtual curriculum.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, we started this, you know, back in March, April. You know, teachers were behind screens figuring some things out. Some things worked, some things didn't. But by June, there are lots of educators who felt much more comfortable about how to run their classes in the best ways they can, given the resources they, you know, had access to. So why not continue that, you know, and develop a stronger virtual platform or a distance learning platform to reach our children and keep people as safe as possible.
And I'm hopeful, too, that we will get to a place where we definitely have a more robust and rigorous remote learning option for families, but it's definitely an area where we still need more work in. And of course, when we started remote learning in March, people really came into that remote learning time period at different levels and different expertise. So there's definitely going to be improvement along the way with anything. So I'm absolutely hopeful and agree with you that we will get it right. We just need a little more time.
We need a little bit more time. And I mean, it makes total sense. Look, blended learning is not brand new. Blended learning has been around since the 70s, where companies started training their employees through videos, right? And then we finally started seeing universities adopt virtual learning
Right.
in this sense. Because blended learning means there's some in-person learning and there's some, some tech computer learning, right?
Yes.
So we've been doing this for a while. And if we give ourselves, some chance and we have some faith in our teachers and there's appropriate PD and support and training, we can get this right. We can absolutely get this right.
We can and we
but
will.
We can and we will.
Right, we can and we will. So let's shift gears for a moment. So, because we know that there's more work to do with that, and we could spend the next hour talking about the remote learning versus in-school learning, et cetera. But let's shift gears for a minute. There's so much talk right now about this idea of blackness and this identity of blackness. Who is black versus who is not black. As a Caribbean woman, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a very interesting question to ask someone of Caribbean descent, especially someone like me who was raised in the Caribbean, where this idea of having to check off a box, to identify the racial category you belong to, is not something that I grew up with. It's not something that my counterparts grew up with. Like, I came from a really, really diverse cosmopolitan nation where we would essentially have to check off every single box, thanks to imperialism and, colonialism, because we're such a mixed people. Very, very mixed people. So it wasn't until I actually personally went to college where I literally embraced that title of I'm black, because I had to check that box in the college application for the first time. And then I had to walk in and really understand what that meant. And I was lucky enough to get an early introduction to the struggle of the Black identity in America, because I went to university where there was a lot of racial tension and incidents happening on campus. And I was part of sit-ins and protests, and I was learning so much at 18 years old, about being Black in America. But I'm grateful for those lessons, as tough as they were at such a young age, and being a fairly new immigrant in the country. I think it's very interesting also negotiating that label, so to speak, because it's a label,
Absolutely.
right? When you think about identity, constitution, so to speak, but it's like us reminding ourselves and remembering that your identity is composed of two pieces, right? It's the way that you view yourself, and it's the way others view you. So it's the identity piece that's imposed on you, and it's the identity piece that you create for yourself. And we negotiate those two constantly, right? Every single day. And then even when we think about the ways that we view our own self, there are different levels and layers to that, right? Like our core identity, who we are as people every single day, and our morals and our values and the things that we hold near and dear to our hearts. And then we have our role identities, right? Based on our profession and what we do every single day. So for example, me and you, our identities as educators, as school leaders, right? And then we have more or less kind of like our social identities. It's like who we are to people and the different circles that we navigate in every day.
There's so many different ideas, so many different levels of identity, just like you said. But let's say, for the sake of this conversation, right? If I wanted to be referred to as a woman, starting tomorrow, I want everybody to refer to me as a woman because I'm going to identify myself as a woman. Some people may be taken back by that, may feel a little uncomfortable. But after a while, people will actually accept it. They will refer to me as Miss Sean Rux and accept it. But if I said to somebody, you know what, starting tomorrow, I'm changing my self-identity. I see myself as a white man, and I need you to see me as a white man also. People would think I was absolutely crazy, right? And I don't want to be a white man, just to be clear. I love being a black man, but you're right. It's a label. Like that term white is almost like really just this idea used to exclude other people. And regardless of whether I wanted to be identified as a white man or not, I can say I want to be identified as such. However, the world is never going to see me as that. The world may accept me if I choose to change my gender, but the world is not going to accept me as another color, another race per se. And regardless of that too, there are still those different identities that people place on you, those labels of criminality, the label of being suspicious, and all those other negative stereotypes that people tend to associate with black men. So it's interesting that Granted, and I'm not asking for a particular answer to this right now, but we definitely need to get to this place where we challenge how white people view blackness, but even more so, really begin to have conversations around how black people view blackness and what does that mean. But that self-identity piece is so important.
Absolutely true. And I think you really touch on something that's really important and powerful, right? This idea that first to begin, Blackness is not a monolith, right? So, there are different people come from all parts of diaspora, have very different cultures that they've been raised in, different experiences, which are all part of what forms their identity. I think the obvious piece is the phenotypic piece, right? Which is like you are black because of a certain melanin, concentration that your skin cells actually produce. And then the other piece is your lived experiences, right? And both kind of come together to inform blackness. But I'll tell you what's very interesting as a Caribbean immigrant, though, the idea of blackness and how our experiences, have been informed by that, especially living in two different places. I can't help but think about people who have kind of like succumbed to the discord between being a Black Caribbean, national versus being a Black African American, and the silly differences in terms of who's this and who's that and who's better and who's not or whatever. For different people, different experiences. But I'll tell you a couple of people who realized that none of that really, really mattered, who recognized that the space between West Indian and the space between African American, like literally has collapsed once you walk into this country. People like Marcus Garvey, people like Malcolm X, right? People like Maya Angelou. These are all people of West Indian descent. By the way, today is Marcus Garvey's birthday. But these are all people who are from the Caribbean who have Caribbean roots. So, for example, Malcolm X's mother was Grenadian.
Right.
Maya Angelou's grandfather was Trinidadian. And of course, you have actual literal frontliners like Stokely Carmichael, straight from Trinidad, Marcus Garvey, straight from Jamaica, who have been at the forefront of civil rights, fighting for being proudly Black in a country that rejected them, and working in the dualism of being an immigrant and being Black at the same time. And have been part of this conversation for a long, long time. Look, the best thing an immigrant can do, any immigrant, especially a Caribbean immigrant, is, be proud in it and recognize, like, I live here now, this is my home, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done here, and I want to be a part of that, regardless of if it affects me, because if it doesn't affect me today, it's going to affect my children tomorrow.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we definitely are prideful, and we should have pride in who we are. But first and foremost, we need to have a clear understanding of who we are. Like, how do we self-identify as opposed to letting other people determine who we are or identify us? Because there are a lot of people out there who believe they are something based on what someone else says, based on how someone else defines who they are. So we got to definitely get out of that space and be cognizant of who we are and really who's responsible, like who's in charge of deciding how I self-identify or who gets to tell me if I'm Black or not, right? So, but most importantly, we definitely need to take a look inward and identify us before we let anyone else identify who we are. We're going to take a short break and be right back with the People Want to Know. We are back with the People Want to Know, and that's just a segment when we take questions from everybody, random questions, and do our best to answer those questions. And Dr. Grimes is going to help me out with these questions. You ready?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go. Tamika from Atlanta wants to know, why are so many people hating on Kamala Harris?
I mean, I think that we should have expected this, pushback and criticism. I mean, we saw it, during the actual Democratic primary. When she was one of the contenders, there were a lot of people who were very vocal about the dissatisfaction with her service, when she was in California. In multiple DA's offices, and when she was the AG over there, her record speaks, for itself and what it is. And then she obviously went on to become a senator, and she has a record there. People are not happy with the ways that her decisions impacted Black and brown families in California, and those affected, they have a right to feel the way that they do. However, the issue is this: I think part of what has held us back on the left is this idea that we are always looking for this very refined and perfect candidate. And it really, really doesn't exist in a politician. If you're looking for purity, I always say, expect that from your minister, your pastor, your local activist, not your local politician. Everyone has, some skeletons in their closet, things that they've done that they felt compelled to do or had to do or hands were tied. And she is one of them. And like many other politicians, I think we should really be focusing on her record in the Senate, the good that she's done, her positions on issues of social justice, and all the bills that she's been a part of, pushing through to become legislation. I think that she deserves a chance. She's extremely brilliant. She's more than qualified. She's articulate and eloquent. She knows her stuff. She's passionate. She wants to do this work. This is not easy work to want to do.
Oh, absolutely not.
So I applaud anyone in her position for even wanting to be there. I think that she stands to do an exceptional job as the VP candidate, for the Democratic Party. And I think people, while they can, they're entitled to feel, whatever pains or ills they may feel towards her. But I think they really need to focus on what she has not done, which is, made decisions to cost hundreds of thousands of lives, passed legislation that's very, very anti-immigrant, created a culture that is very, very deeply rooted in overt racism, towards people who are not white, male especially. Think about all the things that she has not done currently as our current president. We know that she will not do anything, along those lines. So I think people really need to look at the big picture and recognize, the ability for her to really transform lives for most Americans.
Well, I definitely think that we got to give her a chance. And nobody's perfect. There is no perfect candidate. You will not find a perfect candidate. Our current president is not a perfect candidate by any means. So what I'm going to say to Tamika from Atlanta, what I'm hearing is that we need to give the senator a chance. Granted, she may have made some mistakes, but we're going to give her a chance. Jeff from Pennsylvania wants to know, if you had one wish, what would you wish for?
Eradicate COVID-19 for sure. We've seen movies, over time with biological weapons and warfare and terrorism, what's that movie? It's can't think of it. The one with the apes.
With the apes? Planet of the Apes?
No, there was another one. But there was basically some kind of biological agent that got out there. Huh?
No, the only ape movie I know is Planet of the Apes. I mean, it was
there's another one, but I can't think of it right now. But we've just seen it. We've kind of always been ooh, my
gosh. Not Contagion, but Outbreak.
Yeah, not Contagion, but Outbreak.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've literally seen it in movies, and now to actually be living through this, it's insane. We could have never imagined how this thing that you cannot see, literally has wiped out families, decimated businesses, transformed the way that we work, the way we travel, the way we, socialize with each other. Who would have ever thought that 2020 would look like this because of a virus? I would, if I had any powers, that would be the first thing. I would really want to eradicate COVID-19 so we can move forward. And I can't misspeak and say go back to being normal, because normal will never happen again. But for us to move forward into a new future, where we just kind of we have the opportunity to change a lot of the way that we do a lot of things.
Well, and we will absolutely move forward, and I second that. If I had that magic power, I may do the same thing. This virus has in some way, shape, or form impacted everyone. I can't think of someone who hasn't been impacted in some way or another. But we're such a resilient people. And I know that we will move forward in spite of the disaster that this virus is causing, not just across our country, but across the world. So you heard it, Jeff. Now, Jasmine from Brooklyn wants to know, which one's better, McDonald's or Burger King?
Listen, I'm not big on fast food. If you would ask me to pick one, I would say something else. But if I had to choose between the two, I would have to go with Burger King. I've not been a McDonald's fan, and I remember when I was a science teacher, and I remember showing my sixth grade students Super Size Me,
Oh, yes.
and I was like, I never want to eat a 100 cow burger ever again with all of the processing and manufacturing. I'm like, nope. So I'm gonna have to default to Burger King.
Well, it's definitely not one of the places you want to eat at every day, just to be clear. It's tough for me. It's tough for me. I think, that Impossible Burger, that Impossible Whopper that's at Burger King, I'm really feeling that. But my French fries, I got to get my French fries from McDonald's. So I'll take an Impossible Whopper and give me some large fry from McDonald's. So I'm actually split down the middle. But Jasmine from Brooklyn, Dr. Grimes is going with Burger King on this one. So let's just continue on and go back to education for a moment. We know that there is this need for us to continue to work on culturally responsive pedagogy. Why is it taking so long for us to get this right? And what do we need to do differently at this point?
Yeah, well, CRT is, an educational practice has been around for a long time. It's something that like any, pre-service teacher would have like learned and encountered in a pre-service program or an in-service program, pursuing a master's in education. Listen, it's easy in theory, but very, very hard in practice, for a number of reasons. And for those who don't know, CRT, or culture responsive teaching, simply just refers to, it's like a pedagogy that recognizes the importance of like including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. And if you know anything about CRT, you know that you have to defer to the GOAT, Gloria Ladson-Billings, because she's one of the, the pillars of this entire educational philosophy. What that means every single day as a classroom teacher, a lot of things. It means you believe that all students can learn and have high expectations for every student. You have to have deep content knowledge about what you're teaching. You have to be a reflective practitioner, and examine your own life experiences. And if you're bringing your own implicit biases to the classroom, and you have to understand the cultural experiences of your students, their history, their communities, in which they teach, and draw from that knowledge to inform learning in your classroom. Yes. Sounds really simple, right? You basically build a relationship with the students, know who they are, and teach from there. In reality, it's much harder. Why? CRT requires time. Right?
Lots of time.
It requires a lot of time for planning, right? Planning strong lessons that actually entail these elements of like understanding who your students are. It requires a lot of time to reflect. And if we think about urban teachers and what their schedules are and their workload, some of them have 150 students. They run extracurricular activities. They have to grade when they go home. Where is this time for all this magical reflection, right? And getting to know students intimately to learn who they are. Because the reality is, in America, there's about 50 million students who are in public schools. We're not counting students who are in independent schools. More than half that number, 50 million, are students of color and are students who do not speak English as their first language. So we're talking about tremendous difference here. Do their teachers look like them? Me and you both know, by and large, absolutely not. So a teacher...
Throughout my whole educational career, I've had one teacher, one black male teacher from kindergarten to master's degree, doctorate degree, etc. So there's definitely not enough teachers out there who look like us.
Right. Which means essentially teachers are required to do a lot of work to really get to know who their students are, to be able to build trust with them, and then to use that trust to form a strong foundation for teaching and learning in their classroom. And they have to do so, again, with the constraint of time, with the constraint of resources, teaching to the test, right? Because we live in a standardized testing world. So it's very, very, very tough. And even the best teachers, are not able to really do this all the time, every single day. Part of the problem is even the teachers who are well-intentioned and have adopted some of the more popular strategies, the problem with some of those popular strategies is that they're not culturally sustaining. They're not sustainable. Meaning, for example, an easy thing, you tell teachers to do is like include students' culture in the work itself, use their names in the math problems, or use descriptions of like where they're from in math problems. Okay, that might make a student feel slightly more connected to mathematics on that particular day. But is that singular act really going to be transformative, right? To create the space of understanding about each other's culture? I would argue not.
Right.
So it really is something that requires a lot of work. I applaud the teachers who work day in and day out to employ CRT practices, you know, in their teaching. But it's very, very difficult work. It's rewarding work, but it definitely takes time.
Takes a whole lot of time. And in addition to that, we know that the ultimate goal is to ensure that all children, no matter where they come from, where they live, what they look like, receive a quality education, a quality, equal education. Will we ever get to a place where we have an equitable educational system across the board?
You know, being in this space for almost 2 decades, I want to say off the cuff, I want to say yes, right? Because I want to feel hopeful,
right,
you know, about us working to that point. You know, in reality, if you're an educator and you come across this term equity, you know, generally, by and large, you know, there's a big difference between equity and equality, right?
Absolutely.
You know, where equality is more about just students specifically having equal access to things, and equity, you know, lies in the plane of being much more about fairness, right? Meaning we're giving students what we feel they need to thrive. You know, but a lot of times when we think about the conversation about equity too, it's like we have to ask ourselves, in what context? Are we talking about equitable outcomes? Are we talking about equitable resources? Are we talking about equitable support, right? There's so many different ways we can approach this topic of, you know, can we get to equity, you know, in public schooling? If we think about equity being each student getting what he or she, you know, exactly needs in order to have a successful life in whatever way they would like to deem a successful life, that would almost technically mean, Dr. Rux, that every kid in school should have an IEP, not just students who learn differently or have a label, right? Every student should have an individualized education plan so that we can help them and guide them towards this space where they can have the successful outcomes that they would like, you know, in life, so they can live a full life outside of the classroom. Do we have the resources, the manpower, the funding, you know, et cetera, to do that in the public school system? I don't think so.
Well, it's ongoing work. It's definitely ongoing work, and that's work that you and I and so many others who are on the ground with our sleeves up will continue to fight for and hope for. On another note, most recently, Cat Williams dropped a short video where he takes several jabs at Donald Trump. He speaks about the COVID virus and also talks about the Black Lives Matter movement. Let's take a look at this short clip.
Gravity is real. Huh, wasn't that simple? You notice how people didn't start hollering, well, bananas matter too. Nope, not the time for that. Let's stick on facts. Black Lives Matter, period. You can say it, you at home, say it. Wherever you are, no matter who's around, just say it. Say it because it's a fact. I want to apologize if some people have seen civil unrest and didn't understand that civil unrest is what happens every time a place is ruled by the people and the people's needs are not being met. Might not be the happy truth you want, but we deserve the truth. Even one of the greatest cities in the world, New York, a place that's got 100,000 magnificent landmarks. Even they have deep, dark secrets. They got an island in New York called Hart Island. It's where the unclaimed dead bodies go. Now, you think I'm talking about in the past, don't you? No. Today.
I must say, Cat Williams made a whole lot of sense, but I wasn't really feeling the Tekashi 6ix9ine hairdo, though. But besides the hairdo, he definitely made a lot of sense. And to be totally honest, I'm still baffled at the fact that we're in 2020 and we still have to convince people that Black Lives Matter. What are your thoughts on that?
Dr. Rux, just like you, I share that same, frustration and like just bewilderment. Look, nobody shows up to an AIDS walk with cancer matter signs, right? We completely understand in that moment that these people right now in this walk are concerned and trying to draw attention to the plight of people who have AIDS and HIV. And no one disputes that. It should not be any different when it comes to the issue of Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely.
Black Lives Matter just means that Black Lives Matter. It doesn't mean no one else's life matters. Shout out to Dolly Parton for her recent comments on this particular topic. I think part of what really makes people confused, and again, I don't know why, is this idea of you have people who are out there chanting Black Lives Matter and complaining and saying that the system is unjust, and then those same people will say, well, look at you, Dr. Grimes. You're doing okay for yourself. We had Obama. Look at Michelle Obama. Look at these people who are prominent Black people who are able to, gain tremendous success in education in this country. Why were they able to do it and others not? So it's basically an issue of personal responsibility. You're not working hard enough. You're not doing X, Y, Z enough, right? You need to pull up your pants, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, right? Completely overlooking the main issue, which is systemic racism, right? Which is built into our system. It's built into our schools. It's built into our judicial system. It's within every system on the planet. So as much as I work, when you look at me, instead of saying there are no issues because look at you, you should be looking at myself and saying, wow, you did this in spite of. And that's what we really need people to start to really understand. Like, wow, there are successful Black people in America in spite of all of the ills against them.
And I think that's a great place for us to end at right there. Black Lives Matter, and we continue to push forward in spite of. We continue to be great in spite of. We continue to support others in spite of. And I thank you so much, Dr. Nicole Grimes, for being great in spite of. Thank you for checking in to Cocktails and Convo. See you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.